He stood under flashing cameras, his silver hair matted with sweat, stammering denials no one believed. In the same ballroom where he once crushed me, my father now faced a crowd ready to tear him apart. The man who once ruled everything was finally powerless, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The night of the gala had been etched in my mind for years, not just as an event, but as a promise. A promise that if I worked hard enough, studied long enough, became good enough, my father would finally look at me and see someone worthy of carrying the Monroe name. I wore a navy blue dress that night, simple but elegant, the kind of thing I knew he would approve of, tasteful, modest, respectable. My hair, chestnut brown and wavy, was pinned neatly at the sides. Every part of me was polished for his approval. The ballroom buzzed with the energy of the town's elite. Men in sharp suits, women glittering with jewelry and ambition. Laughter tinkled from champagne flutes. Waiters moved like chess pieces between tables draped in heavy linens. I stood near the back, my heart hammering, rehearsing in my head how I would smile when he called my name. When Daniel Monroe took the stage, the room fell into a reverent hush. He stood tall in a tailored black suit, silver cufflinks glinting under the chandelier light, commanding the room with the same effortless authority he always wielded. He cleared his throat, allowed a beat of dramatic silence, then smiled. Cold, thin smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice deep and smooth. "Tonight I am proud to introduce the future of Monroe Industries." My breath caught. This was it. "And that future," he said, voice swelling, "is Derek Monroe." Applause burst across the room. I blinked once, then again. Derek, my cousin, the golden boy who had barely scraped through college, bounded up to the stage grinning like he had just won the lottery. I watched him shake my father's hand, accept the applause like he had earned it. Then came the blow, swift, public, brutal. "Some of us," my father continued, chuckling, "just aren't cut out for greatness. Some of us will always disappoint." For one chilling second, his eyes found mine. He didn't linger. He didn't need to. The message was delivered, wrapped and signed. A polite, strained laughter rippled through the audience, the kind people give when they sense they should laugh but don't quite understand why. I stood there, rooted to the polished marble floor, the blood roaring in my ears so loudly I barely heard the rest of his speech. My palms grew clammy, my mouth went dry. Every molecule of the dream I had carried for years shattered under the glittering chandeliers, falling around me like invisible glass. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I simply stood there, a monument to a life that had been built on the wrong hopes. And somewhere deep inside, something twisted and broke beyond repair. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silence, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly the leather creaked under my fingers. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I simply stared blankly at the road ahead, his words echoing through my mind, poisoning every mile between the gala and my front door. Some of us will always disappoint. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the casual cruelty. The fact that to him, my collapse was entertainment, a passing joke to season his speech. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat there in the car, engine running, feeling the night press down on me like a second skin. Something inside me had shifted. Not a wound, not a bruise, but a fracture that ran deep into the parts of me I had spent years molding into what he demanded. In the days that followed, Daniel Monroe moved through life untouched, unchanged. He hosted charity luncheons. He laughed with town officials over wine. He patted Derek on the back during Sunday dinners, beaming with the pride he had never spared for me. I attended out of obligation, smiling when I was expected to, nodding at conversations I barely heard. Inside, I was silent. Inside, something black and corrosive was growing. I saw it all now. The smirks he tossed at my expense when I tried to speak about law school. The way he would introduce Derek to guests as our family's real future, while I hovered near the edge of the room, a decorative afterthought. How he only called me into meetings when there were documents to be signed, errands to be run, problems to be cleaned up quietly, tasks unworthy of the heir he truly desired. I had mistaken necessity for affection, utility for pride, obedience for love. It was never about me. It was about control. Daniel didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as a tool, something to be used, stored, forgotten, but not anymore. The hatred that grew in my chest wasn't wild or reckless. It was cold, measured. It slid into my veins like molten iron, hardening my heart against every polite smile, every empty nod he threw my way. I would no longer beg for scraps at a table built from my own broken spirit. He had broken me once, but he had made a fatal mistake. He thought the ruins he left behind would stay ruins. He had no idea I was learning how to sharpen them into weapons. And when fate finally placed that weapon in my hands, I didn't hesitate. The rain hammered against the windshield in frantic bursts, drowning out the static whispers of the radio. I sat parked outside the lawyer's office, the engine idling, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. Part of me screamed to drive away, to retreat into the numbness I had grown used to, but the other part, the colder, harder part, tightened its grip and pushed me forward. The building itself was unremarkable, a narrow strip of glass and brick tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered cafe. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and stronger of something metallic, like the storm that had followed me in. Jack Carter stood waiting, just as he had sounded over the phone, a man carved out of sharp lines and quiet certainty. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, short brown hair combed neatly back, slate-gray suit hanging effortlessly off his lean frame. His blue eyes were piercing, framed by thin glasses that gave him a look of perpetual calculation. "Emily," he greeted, offering a hand that was firm but not aggressive. His voice was calm, a low hum that somehow sliced through the tension buzzing in my ears. Without preamble, he gestured for me to sit and slid a thick, worn folder across the battered oak table between us. His fingers tapped it once, deliberately. "You need to see this." I opened it with cautious hands, the paper edges biting at my fingertips. Inside were contracts, dozens of them, some legitimate, most doctored, manipulated with the kind of practiced precision that spoke of years of careful deceit. Tax documents filled with glaring discrepancies. Shell companies created to funnel money under the guise of charitable donations. False beneficiaries. Fake leases. Quiet siphons draining cash into black holes no one else had bothered to notice. And at the center of it all, my father's signature. Over and over again, in thick, assertive strokes. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the pages, faster and faster. Each sheet weighed heavier than the last. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "He's been laundering money for nearly 15 years, he said, his tone almost clinical. Fake charities, fake donors, fake invoices, built his whole empire on sand. I couldn't speak, could only stare as reality rearranged itself around me. Daniel Monroe wasn't just cruel. He was a criminal, a fraud, a liar who had clawed his way to the top over broken laws and stolen dreams. Then Jack's voice cut in again, cool and razor sharp. Your cousin's name is on several documents, too. Involuntarily. If this goes public, It won't just end your father's career. It'll destroy everything he's built. I sat there, papers splayed across the desk like the remains of a shattered kingdom, my hands trembling not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Righteous, burning fury. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about balance, about finally tearing down the monument of lies he had forced all of us to worship, and I would be the one to swing the hammer. We didn't go public in a blaze of fury. We moved with silence, with patience, the kind of patience born only from deeply nursed wounds. Jack and I dismantled Daniel Monroe's empire the way a surgeon cuts out rot, slowly, methodically, with steady hands. An anonymous tip here, a leaked document there. A whisper to a persistent reporter who had long suspected that Monroe Industries wasn't as clean as it pretended to be. The first cracks were small. A charity's financials questioned in a local blog. An anonymous audit ordered quietly by the state. Then came the rumblings. Low at first, barely noticed among the hum of everyday life. But they grew. Reporters started showing up at the company's front doors. Phone calls went unanswered. Old allies turned cold. It didn't take long for the smell of blood to attract real predators. Federal investigators, forensic accountants, hungry journalists looking for a scandal to make their careers. Within weeks, Monroe Industries was no longer the golden pillar of our town. It was a crumbling monument surrounded by circling vultures. The final blow landed exactly where it needed to, at the annual town gala. Almost a year to the day since he had humiliated me under those same chandeliers. I arrived early, blending into the crowd, no longer seeking a spotlight, only a front row seat to history. Daniel stood near the stage, flanked by his usual entourage, still wearing that same tailored black suit, though it now hung looser on him. The light from the chandeliers caught in the sweat shining on his forehead, the crisp white of his shirt collar already damp. When the first camera flashes hit him, aggressive, urgent, angry, I watched the moment realization dawned. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Accusations crackled through the room like gunfire. Fraud. Charity scams. Money laundering. Daniel raised a hand, tried to smile, tried to deny, but the words stuck in his throat. He sputtered half-formed denials into a microphone, his voice cracking under the weight of their precision. His hands, the same hands that once clapped my shoulder with cold approval, trembled visibly now. His proud silver hair was matted to his forehead, his eyes darting desperately from face to face, searching for allies and finding none. I stood near the back of the room, stone still, heart steady. There was no triumphal scream rising inside me, only a deep, unwavering clarity. Justice wasn't loud. It was a quiet collapse. Within days, the indictment came. Financial fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. His assets frozen, his reputation obliterated. Derek, humiliated and furious, cut all ties with him publicly, denouncing Daniel in an open letter that went viral by morning. The town that once worshipped my father's name now whispered it with disgust. Or not at all. Daniel Monroe, the man who had once stood taller than the town itself, now stood alone, broken by the very empire he had built on lies. And for the first time in my life, I understood the quiet, devastating satisfaction of seeing the mighty fall, not with a roar, but with a whisper.